the city that doesn't forgive. There are cities that welcome you with light, and there are cities that test you with noise. Sao Paulo does both. From far away, it looks like ambition made of glass and concrete. From inside, it can feel like a machine that never sleeps, never slows down, and never asks if you're okay. It only asks what you can produce. Rafael arrived in the city with a suitcase that still smelled like his mother's laundry soap and a head full of ordinary dreams. He was not born into tragedy. Not the kind people put into documentaries. He had a father who worked too much, a mother who prayed too quietly, and a childhood where the worst fear was getting caught lying. He grew up in the interior, where neighbors knew your name, where the sky felt bigger than your problems, and where a man's reputation was a second skin. But Sao Paulo didn't care about any of that. In his first months, Rafael learned the rules of the new world. Rent went up, food went up, bus fares went up, and your pride went down. He found work in a logistics company, the kind of job that starts early and ends late, with fluorescent lights that make even your successes look tired. He learned how to smile at supervisors, how to speak with urgency without sounding desperate, and how to swallow humiliation like it was part of the salary. At first it was enough. He would call home and say, "I'm fine." He would send money when he could, and when he couldn't, he would send excuses wrapped in confidence. Then came the first crack in the wall. It happened in a way that almost seems insulting because it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a robbery or an accident or an eviction notice taped to his door. It was a credit card. One of those booths in a shopping mall, with a young representative smiling like they were offering you a future. Rafael didn't want to look small, didn't want to admit he was barely floating. He signed. At the beginning, the card felt like oxygen. A meal after a long shift. A new pair of shoes when the old ones split at the sides. A small gift for his mother's birthday so he could pretend distance didn't matter. Then life did what it always does. It got more expensive. The bus route changed and cost more. His roommate moved out and didn't pay the last month. His landlord raised rent with the casual cruelty of someone who knows you have nowhere else to go. Rafael started paying the minimum on the card. Then he started paying late. Then he started paying with one card to cover another. Debt is a quiet predator. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It whispers at night when you can't sleep, when you open banking apps like they're wounds. It whispers in the morning when your phone lights up with unknown numbers and you already know who's calling. It whispers in the space between paychecks, where anxiety breeds like mold. Rafael began to change, not all at once, but like a photograph fading in sunlight. He stopped calling home as often. He stopped going out. He stopped smiling with his eyes. At work he started making mistakes. Small ones, then bigger ones. A missed delivery window. A wrong inventory count. A supervisor's warning spoken softly but meant to cut. And then, because people are human and humans reach for relief, Rafael reached too. It wasn't the kind of drug story people expect. No alleyway at first. No dramatic peer pressure. No villain with a grin. It started at a bar near the warehouse after a brutal week. A coworker he barely knew leaned in and said, "You're wired all the time. You need something to take the edge off." Rafael laughed, the way men laugh when they're trying to prove they're not fragile. The coworker didn't insist. He simply offered a shortcut like it was nothing. A small white line in a bathroom stall that smelled like disinfectant and stale beer. Rafael hesitated, then remembered his debt, his sleepless nights, his clenched jaw, his constant fear. He thought just once. The first time didn't feel like falling. It felt like relief. For a couple of hours, his chest loosened. His thoughts stopped racing. His shame got quieter. He talked more. He laughed more. He felt normal. That's the lie drugs tell, and it's the most dangerous one. The next week was harder because the brain remembers relief. The body remembers escape. The mind learns a new definition of peace. Rafael told himself rules. Only on weekends, only after work, only when things were really bad. But things were always bad now. His debt deepened, not only because of interest but because of the way addiction rewires priorities. You stop paying bills because you're paying panic. You stop thinking about tomorrow because today is already unbearable. Soon the calls from the banks became daily, then multiple times a day. Then messages from collection agencies with words like legal action and seizure and penalty. His landlord started knocking at the door with a face that didn't bother hiding contempt. Rafael began avoiding home. He began avoiding mirrors. One night, after a fight with his supervisor, Rafael walked out of work and didn't go back. He told himself he would rest, reset, find something better. But the next morning, his phone buzzed with demands, his stomach tightened, and the city outside his window looked like a threat. He did what a desperate brain does. He chose the fastest way to make the fear stop. By then, cocaine wasn't enough. It had become expensive and inconsistent. Someone offered something cheaper, something that hit harder, something that didn't require a bar bathroom. It came with the kind of promise that sounds absurd to anyone who hasn't been there. Instant relief, instant courage, instant disappearance. Raphael said no the first time. Then he said maybe. Then he stopped saying anything at all. In the weeks that followed, his life collapsed in a sequence so fast it felt like being pushed downstairs. He missed rent. He lost his room. He sold small things first: headphones, a watch, a jacket he used to wear when he wanted to look respectable. Then he sold bigger things. His laptop. His phone. Then he sold pieces of himself he didn't know could be sold. His dignity, his honesty, his future. He tried to go back home once. He even bought a bus ticket with the last money he had. But at the terminal, he saw families with bags, children eating snacks, couples holding hands. He saw normal life moving forward. And he felt like a contaminant. He walked away from the gate and told himself it was temporary. He told himself he would clean up first, then return. He told himself he would be someone his mother could look in the eyes. He didn't know he was already becoming someone who would struggle to look at himself. By the time Raphael first slept outdoors, it wasn't dramatic. It was not a movie scene with rain and tragedy. It was simply exhaustion. A bench, a jacket pulled over his head, and the constant sound of traffic that made sleep feel like drowning. The city didn't stop. It never does. It kept shining in the distance like it had no idea he existed. And maybe it didn't. The bottom has an address. There is a certain kind of hunger that doesn't start in the stomach. It starts in the mind. It starts as a tremor in your thoughts, a restlessness that makes every second feel too long. It starts as a whisper that becomes a shout. You need it, you need it, you need it. When Raphael woke up on that bench, his back stiff, his mouth dry, he didn't think, how did I get here? He thought, where can I find the next hit? That is what addiction does. It narrows your world until survival and self-destruction become the same thing. He drifted toward the center, toward places where he could disappear among thousands. Where no one asked questions because everyone had their own. Where the streets had different rules and different economies. He learned quickly that being homeless in Sao Paulo is not one experience. It's a hierarchy. It's a constant negotiation. Where you sleep matters. Who you sleep near matters. Whether you have shoes matters. Whether you look weak matters. And Raphael looked weak. At first he tried to stay clean, at least visually. He would wash his face in public bathrooms. He would keep his hair somewhat controlled. He would speak politely. But the street strips politeness off you like skin. Within days he was robbed of what little he had left. A man with tired eyes and a knife so small it looked almost pathetic pressed it against Raphael's ribs and said, "Don't make this hard." Raphael didn't. He handed over his cash and watched the man vanish into the crowd. Later, when Raphael told someone about it, they shrugged and said, "At least you're alive." He began to understand the new measurements of fortune. His first real night among the crowd of users, where crack smoke hung in the air like fog, was the night his old life became a distant rumor. People there didn't ask your last name. They asked what you had. Some were older, faces carved by years. Some were young, with eyes that looked too old already. Some had been on the street for a long time. Some, like Raphael, were still adjusting to the idea that there was no bed waiting for them. A man named Duda noticed Raphael's confusion and leaned in like a guide. "You're new," Duda said. Raphael tried to deny it, but denial doesn't work when your clothes still look like they came from a closet. Duda smiled. Not kindly. Not cruelly. Just knowingly. "Listen," he said. "You want to survive? Stop thinking like a citizen." That line stayed with Raphael because it was true. The street is not built for citizens. It's built for ghosts. Raphael became a ghost quickly. He begged sometimes. He scavenged sometimes. He did odd jobs when he could, carrying boxes, cleaning storefronts, anything that earned coins or food. But every small effort was swallowed by the bigger demand, the drug. Days blurred. Time became meaningless. The sun rising didn't feel like hope. It felt like exposure. And the shame was constant. He avoided reflective surfaces. He avoided his own name. He avoided any memory that might remind him he used to be someone. Every now and then, he would see a man in a suit walking confidently, and something in Raphael's chest would twist like an old injury. That could have been me, his mind would say. Then the hunger would rise and the thought would drown. One afternoon, he heard his mother's voice in his head, clear as if she were beside him. "Rafa," the voice said, "come home." He turned around, startled, scanning faces looking for her. But of course she wasn't there. He laughed, an ugly sound, and a woman nearby watched him with quiet pity. "You talked to someone?" she asked. Raphael swallowed. "No." The woman introduced herself as Lucia. Her hair was tangled, but her eyes were sharp. Too sharp for the street. The kind of eyes that suggested she had once been a person with plans. "I've seen you," Lucia said. "You're not from here." Raphael wanted to say, "I'm from somewhere. I had a family. I had a job." But those words felt like lies now, or worse, like evidence. Instead he asked, "How do you get out?" Lucia stared at him a long time. "People don't," she said finally. "They move. They hide. They die. But out?" She shook her head. "Out is for other people." That night, Raphael hit a point that wasn't dramatic in the way movies show, but it was decisive. He had been awake for almost 2 days. He had smoked too much. His heart felt like it was trying to escape his ribs. His mouth tasted like metal. His skin crawled with invisible insects. He believed, truly believed, that someone was following him. A shadow in the corner of his eye. Footsteps behind him. A whisper. He ran through streets he didn't recognize until he collapsed behind a dumpster, shaking, sweating, praying in fragments even though he didn't know if he still believed in anything. And that's when a hand touched his shoulder. Raphael whipped around, ready to fight, ready to scream. It was a priest. Not the kind Raphael had known as a child, with clean hands and sermons. This man wore worn clothes and sneakers, and his face carried exhaustion like a second beard. "Easy," the priest said. "You're not in trouble." Raphael's eyes filled with tears that he hated. "I'm dying," Raphael whispered. The priest nodded, not shocked, not judgmental. "I know," he said softly. "That's why I'm here." The priest's name was Father Renato. He worked with a small outreach team, volunteers who brought food, water, basic medical care, and something rarer, attention. They offered Raphael a sandwich and a bottle of water. Raphael ate like an animal, hands trembling, eyes scanning for threats. When he finished, Father Renato said something simple. "Do you want help?" Raphael almost said no. Pride is stubborn. Even on the street, pride tries to survive. But then Raphael remembered his mother's voice. He remembered the man with the knife. He remembered Lucia's eyes. And he realized something terrifying. If he didn't say yes now, there might not be another chance. He nodded. The next hours were a blur of paperwork, van rides, and fear. Raphael expected traps, judgment, police. Instead, he was taken to a shelter connected to a treatment program. The building smelled like disinfectant and sweat. The walls were plain. The rules were strict. And the first night, when he lay on a thin mattress, his body screamed for the drug. He shook so hard his teeth clicked. He vomited. He begged silently, not for salvation, but for the pain to stop. A nurse sat beside him and said, "Breathe. 1 minute at a time." Raphael wanted to punch the wall. He wanted to run. He wanted to disappear. But he stayed. Not because he was strong. Because he was tired of dying. Days turned into weeks. The withdrawal eased, but the emptiness remained. In that emptiness, memories returned like a flood. The debts. The lies. The calls he never answered. The family he vanished from. One afternoon, Raphael sat in a group session and finally spoke the sentence that had been rotting inside him. "My name is Raphael," he said, voice shaking. "And I don't trust myself." The room didn't laugh. No one looked away. A man across from him nodded and said, "Welcome back." Those words hit harder than any drug. Because what Raphael wanted, what he had wanted all along, was not the high. It was permission to exist. The program required steps. Therapy, chores, meetings, routine. It required humility. And humility, for Raphael, was both medicine and torture. He called his mother after 2 months. When she answered, there was a pause, like she didn't recognize the number. "Hello," she said. Raphael swallowed, and the shame rose like acid. "Mom," he whispered. On the other end, silence. Then a sound that broke him, his mother's breath catching, the beginning of tears. "My son," she said. Raphael cried like a child. He apologized, stumbling over words, trying to compress years of failure into one phone call. His mother didn't ask for explanations. She didn't demand details. She only said, "Stay alive." After the call, Raphael sat alone, hands shaking, and made a vow that was less a promise and more a plea. If I get out, he thought, I will become someone who saves people like me. It was a beautiful vow. And it was dangerous. Because wanting to change is one thing. Changing when your past is hungry is something else entirely. Before Raphael finished the program, a counselor asked him, "What do you want to do when you leave?" Raphael hesitated. He could say anything. Construction. security, delivery work. Instead, he said the truth that had been growing in him like a fever. "I want to work in law enforcement," he said. "I want to fight what did this." The counselor studied him carefully. "Then start by fighting yourself," she said. "And know this, the world will test whether you deserve that uniform." Raphael nodded. He didn't realize yet how literal those words would become. And now, before the story continues, I want to ask you something, because what Raphael is about to attempt is the kind of thing people argue about. If someone has fallen this far, if someone has been addicted, homeless, and broken, do you believe they should be allowed to wear a badge someday? Leave your opinion in the comments, because what happens next depends on whether you believe redemption is real. The promise nobody believes. Raphael left the treatment program with 2 plastic bags of clothes, a list of meetings to attend, and a mind that was finally clear enough to feel the full weight of his past. Recovery is not a victory parade. It is a long, quiet war where the enemy wears your face. In the first weeks, Raphael lived in a small transitional housing unit. He shared space with other men in recovery. The rules were strict: curfews, random checks, mandatory meetings. Raphael accepted the rules like a man clinging to a ledge. He got a job washing dishes at a restaurant. The pay was low, but it was honest, and it came with something he hadn't had in a long time: a routine. He woke up early. He made his bed. He went to work. He attended meetings at night. He drank coffee that tasted like burnt hope and listened to people tell stories that sounded like his. And he studied. That part surprised even him. In the shelter, someone had mentioned public service exams, concurso. In Brazil, it's a path to stability, but it's also a brutal filter. You don't get lucky. You earn it with pages and pages of discipline. Raphael began with the basics: Portuguese grammar, math, logic. He studied on a borrowed phone, then on printed pages, then in a public library where the silence felt sacred. At first, it was humiliating. He had forgotten how to learn. His attention still fractured sometimes, cravings creeping in like smoke under a door. But Raphael was stubborn. And beneath the shame, beneath the fear, he had something powerful: a reason. He wasn't studying to win. He was studying to rebuild a self he could stand next to. Months passed. Raphael gained weight. His eyes steadied. His hands stopped shaking. Then, one afternoon as he left the restaurant, he saw a man leaning against a wall across the street. The man wore a cap low over his eyes. He smoked calmly. And when Raphael looked up, the man smiled. Raphael's stomach dropped. Duda. The same street guide from his worst days. Duda walked toward him like they were old friends. "Look at you," Duda said. "Clean. Working. Trying to be a saint." Raphael's heart pounded. His mind raced through fear. Is this a test? A trap? A temptation? What do you want? Raphael asked, keeping his voice steady. Duda shrugged. Nothing. I just heard you were alive. Raphael swallowed. I'm busy. Duda stepped closer, lowering his voice. You think you can run from what you were? You think the city forgets? The city remembers everything, brother. Raphael's fingers clenched. Leave me alone. Duda tilted his head. Or what? You'll call the police? He laughed. You were the police's favorite client not long ago. The words stung because they were true. Duda leaned in, the smell of smoke and street life flooding Raphael's senses. You know where the relief is, Duda whispered. Just one hit. No one has to know. For a moment, Raphael felt the old hunger flare, not in his body but in his memory. The promise of silence in his mind. The promise of escape. Then he pictured his mother's voice on the phone. Stay alive. He stepped back. No, Raphael said quietly but firmly. Duda's smile faded slightly. We'll see. And then he walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Raphael stood frozen, trembling, not from desire but from the realization that the past was not a chapter closed. It was a predator waiting. That night, Raphael went to a meeting and confessed what happened. He expected judgment. Instead, an older man placed a hand on his shoulder and said, You said no. That's not small. That's everything. Raphael nodded, tears burning his eyes. He went home and studied until dawn. Years moved like this: work, study, meetings, discipline. Raphael saved money slowly, paid off small debts first, negotiated others. Some creditors refused to be human. Some did not. But he kept going. Eventually, he passed a university entrance exam and enrolled in night classes. He chose law. It wasn't romantic. It was exhausting. He sat in classrooms with younger students who talked about internships and parties. Raphael talked about survival and responsibility. He kept his head down. But inside he was building something. A new identity. As he approached graduation, he began preparing for the police federal exam. Not because it was glamorous, because it was the symbol of what he wanted to become. A protector, not a cautionary tale. He trained physically too. Running in the early mornings, push-ups at home, weight training when he could afford a cheap gym. He knew the process would be ruthless. Tests, medical exams, psychological evaluations, background checks. His past terrified him. Not because he had committed crimes that would show up on paper, but because of what people might discover through interviews and investigation. He had been a ghost. Ghosts leave traces. One day, during a mock interview at a prep course, an instructor asked him, "Why do you want this career?" Raphael hesitated. He could give the generic answer about public service, justice, stability. Instead, he said, "Because I've seen what happens when nobody helps. And I don't want to be the kind of man who looks away." The room went quiet. The instructor nodded slowly. "That answer," he said, "will either make you unstoppable or destroy you." On the day of the exam, Raphael arrived early, wearing a plain shirt, holding his identification like it was fragile. He looked around at the other candidates. Many had studied for years. Some came from police families. Some came from privilege. Some came from obsession. Raphael came from the bottom. When the test began, he felt his heart pounding like it used to on the street. But this time he breathed, one question at a time, one page at a time. Weeks later, the results came. Raphael had passed the written stage. He sat on his bed and stared at the screen, unable to move. Then he laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt impossible. He wasn't done. Not even close. The physical test nearly broke him. He finished with bruised hands and trembling legs. The medical evaluation made him sweat more than any sprint. But the worst part, by far, was the background investigation. Because now, the uniform was close enough to smell, and the past was close enough to bite. An investigator called him in for an interview. The room was plain. The man across the table looked bored, but his eyes were sharp. He flipped through papers and asked routine questions. Address, family, employment history. Then he paused. "Tell me about the years you were unavailable," the investigator said. Raphael's mouth went dry. He could lie. He could omit. He could try to shape the truth into something acceptable. But he remembered the counselor's warning. The world will test whether you deserve that uniform. Raphael took a breath. "I was addicted," he said. "I was homeless." The investigator's pen stopped. Raphael kept going, voice steady even as his chest tightened. "I entered treatment. I've been in recovery for years. I attend meetings. I have documentation from the program. I've rebuilt my life. I'm not asking you to forget what I was. I'm asking you to judge what I am now." The investigator studied him silently. "How do I know you won't relapse under pressure?" he asked. Raphael's eyes burned, but he didn't look away. "You don't," he said. "Not with certainty. But you can look at the evidence of my discipline. You can talk to my supervisors, my professors, my sponsor. You can see that I'm not the man who runs anymore." The investigator leaned back, expression unreadable. "This career breaks people," he said. "Even the clean ones." Raphael nodded. "I know." The man closed the folder. "We'll see," he said. Raphael left the building feeling like he had just walked out of a courtroom. Weeks passed with no answer. Every day felt like waiting for a verdict. Then the message arrived. He was approved. Raphael read it 3 times to be sure it was real. He looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "Thank you," though he wasn't sure who he was thanking. Soon after, he received the call for the training course in Brasilia, the academy, the place where civilians become federal police officers. Raphael packed his bag slowly, carefully, like a man preparing for war. Because he knew something most people didn't. Getting in was only the beginning. And Brasilia? Brasilia wasn't just a city, it was a mirror. And mirrors are dangerous when you have a past you're still trying to forgive. And if you've stayed with me this far, I want to thank you, truly. Because this is the point in the story where most people expect redemption to be clean and simple. But what comes next is where the real suspense begins, and the best is still ahead. Brasilia is no place for ghosts. Brasilia looks like a plan drawn by someone who believed humans could be organized. Wide avenues, sharp lines, buildings that seem to float above the ground, a sky that feels too open, too honest. For Raphael, the city was both hope and threat. He arrived at the academy with a suitcase, a folder of documents, and a fear he couldn't fully name. The first day was a shock to the body. Early wake-ups, formation, instructions delivered with a tone that didn't invite questions. physical training that tested not just muscles but will. Raphael had trained, but training alone doesn't prepare you for the psychological pressure of being watched constantly. Here you are evaluated in everything: performance, discipline, attitude, control. And Raphael's past had taught him one thing very well: how to hide. But the academy was designed to strip hiding away. In the dorms, he met men and women from every corner of Brazil. Some had the confidence of people who had never fallen. Some had the hunger of people who had. Raphael kept to himself at first. He listened more than he spoke. He feared the simple question, "So, where are you from?" because the truth would lead to another truth and another, until he reached the part he couldn't bear to say out loud. Training days were long. Firearms instruction, legal procedures, tactical exercises, ethics classes where instructors spoke about integrity like it was oxygen. Raphael took notes obsessively. But the most brutal lessons weren't on paper. They happened inside. There were moments during training when his heart would race and he would feel that old panic, the street panic, rise in him. A loud shout, a sudden command, a crowded corridor. He would smell sweat and dust, and for a split second, his brain would flash to smoke and desperation. He learned to breathe through it. One afternoon, during a high-stress simulation, an instructor pushed the class hard, barking orders, demanding speed, punishing hesitation. A younger trainee near Raphael froze, overwhelmed. The instructor stepped in, voice sharp. "Move. You're dead if you hesitate." The trainee's eyes widened, breathing fast. Raphael saw it immediately: panic. The kind that destroys judgment. Raphael leaned in, low voice, barely audible. "Breathe. Look at me. And out. One step at a time." The trainee blinked, focused, steadied. They completed the exercise. Afterward, the trainee approached Raphael privately. "How did you know what to say?" he asked. Raphael hesitated. Then he gave a half-truth. "I've been afraid before," he said. The trainee nodded as if that explained everything. But Raphael knew. His experience with fear was not academic. It was lived. In a strange way, his past was making him better at this. That thought frightened him, because it meant the worst years of his life still had power. In the academy cafeteria, conversations often turned to ambition. Some wanted specialized units. Some wanted prestige. Some spoke about promotions like destiny. Raphael didn't speak much about the future. His future felt fragile, like glass. Then one night he received a message from an unknown number. Just 2 words: "I see you." Raphael's blood turned cold. He stared at the screen, pulse hammering. Could have been a prank. It could have been nothing. But Raphael knew paranoia intimately, and he also knew that sometimes paranoia is simply pattern recognition. The next day, he noticed a man near the academy gates, leaning on a car, watching candidates pass. The man wore a cap low over his eyes. Raphael's stomach tightened. Duda. Impossible. Brasilia was far from Sao Paulo. Different world. And yet the face was unmistakable. Raphael's steps slowed. Duda didn't approach. He didn't wave. He simply smiled, small, confident, poisonous. Raphael kept walking, forcing himself not to react. Inside, his mind screamed, "Oh, what?" That night, Raphael couldn't sleep. He sat on his bed, staring at the ceiling, realizing something he had tried to ignore. Some people don't let you change. Not because they care about morality, but because your change threatens their power. The next morning, Raphael reported the message to an academy officer. He expected to be dismissed. Instead, the officer's expression hardened. "You have enemies?" the officer asked. Raphael swallowed. "From my old life. I didn't think it could reach here." The officer nodded slowly. "It can." Raphael felt exposed. "What happens now?" he asked. "We increase attention," the officer said. "And you keep your discipline. Don't do anything stupid." Raphael nodded, but fear isn't logical. Fear is memory. Days continued. Raphael graduated the course with strong performance. He was not the top, but he was solid, reliable, controlled. He received his assignment, a unit focused on financial crimes and drug trafficking routes, work that required patience, investigation, and the ability to stare at ugly realities without flinching. Raphael returned to his daily life with a badge and a weapon, feeling the weight of responsibility like a second heart. And still, the unknown number texted again. "You think you're clean." Raphael's hands shook slightly as he read it. He realized then, this wasn't just temptation. This was leverage. Someone wanted something from him. And the worst part was that Raphael didn't know what. In his first months on duty, Raphael worked cases that felt both distant and familiar. He followed money trails that turned crime into spreadsheets. He watched surveillance footage of deals that looked like shadows exchanging poison. Sometimes he would see a user in the corner of a frame, thin, desperate, and he would feel a stab in his chest. That could have been me. But he stayed professional. He stayed focused. Then came a case file that made the air in the room feel heavier. A trafficking network with connections in Sao Paulo, and whispers of influence reaching into government contractors. The file included nicknames, routes, bank accounts, and one name in the margins, handwritten by an analyst. Duda? Raphael stared at it. His past wasn't just haunting him. It was now officially part of his job. He could do what he had always done before, hide. Or he could do what he promised himself, fight. The next operation was planned quietly, with careful coordination. Warrants, surveillance, timing. Raphael volunteered for the team going to Sao Paulo. His supervisor raised an eyebrow. You have history there? Raphael's throat tightened. Yes, he said. But I can handle it. The supervisor studied him. Make sure you can. On the plane to Sao Paulo, Raphael looked down at the city and felt a strange calm. He wasn't returning as a ghost. He was returning as someone who could choose. But choice comes with cost. And Raphael was about to pay. The top doesn't let you sleep. In Sao Paulo, the air felt heavier than Raphael remembered. Not because the city had changed, but because he had. He moved through operations briefings with a controlled face, reading addresses that used to be part of his nightmares. The team targeted warehouses, financial intermediaries, and street-level distribution points connected to a larger laundering scheme. The plan was precise. At dawn they moved. Doors forced. Orders shouted. Hands raised. Weapons secured. Raphael's body performed like it had been trained, but his mind was watching everything with double vision. He recognized corners. He recognized smells. He recognized the way certain people looked at police, half fear, half hatred, half calculation. During one raid they found ledgers, phones, and stacks of small bills. In a back room, a young man sat shaking, eyes wide, barely adult. Raphael approached carefully. The young man's lips trembled. I didn't do nothing, he whispered. Raphael looked at him and saw himself at 20-something, terrified and trapped. Listen, Raphael said, voice low. Right now you tell the truth. You take the chance you still have. The young man stared at him like he didn't believe kindness existed. Then, unexpectedly, the young man said, Duda said nobody gets out. Raphael's spine tightened. Where is he? Raphael asked. The young man shook his head quickly. I don't know. He's not street anymore. He's connected. Connected. That word is dangerous in any country. It means protection. It means reach. It means the law has to fight with one hand tied. Back at the command post, Raphael's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Careful, officer. Raphael's jaw clenched. He showed the messages to the unit's cyber analyst. They traced what they could, but the number bounced through layers of anonymity. Professional. Intentional. Someone was watching. That night, Raphael couldn't sleep. Not from cravings, those were old ghosts, but from the sense that he was inside a larger game. In the following weeks, the investigation uncovered something worse than street trafficking. Shell companies. Fake invoices. Money funneled through legitimate businesses. A network that survived because it looked clean on paper. And then, a name surfaced. Someone in a position of authority, someone who could make warrants disappear, someone who could warn targets before raids. Corruption. Raphael sat in a meeting as senior officials discussed strategy, and he felt a familiar nausea. Because corruption felt like addiction. It was the same logic. Take what you want now, pay later if ever. Raphael's supervisor pulled him aside. You're too emotionally close, the supervisor said. I can see it. Raphael's throat tightened. I'm focused. The supervisor's eyes narrowed. Focused is good. But if you make this personal, you'll make mistakes. Raphael nodded, but inside it was already personal. Because Duda wasn't just a target. Duda was a symbol of the life Raphael escaped. And symbols don't stay on paper. One evening, as Raphael left a building, a car pulled up slowly beside him. The window rolled down. Duda sat inside smiling. Raphael's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon, but he stopped. Public street. Eyes everywhere. Duda spoke calmly. Nice uniform. Raphael's voice was controlled. Get out of here. Duda laughed softly. You think you're better now? You think the badge cleans you? Raphael stared at him. What do you want? Duda's smile tightened. I want you to remember. I want you to know you don't get to rewrite the story without paying. Raphael's chest tightened. You're being investigated. Duda shrugged. By who? By you? The former street ghost. Raphael's eyes hardened. You don't scare me. Duda leaned closer. You sure? Because I have pictures. Old ones. On the street. And people love a scandal. Especially in Brasilia. Raphael's blood ran cold. Duda continued, voice almost gentle. All it takes is one leak. One rumor. You'll be finished. Raphael's mind raced. He had confessed in investigation, but public perception is not paperwork. Public perception is a knife. Duda smiled again. So here's the deal. You stop pushing this case. You look away. And you keep your shiny new life. Raphael's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Then he said something that surprised even him. No. Duda blinked. The smile wavered. Raphael's voice stayed steady. No. You don't own me. You don't get to decide who I am. Duda's expression darkened. Then you'll lose everything. The car rolled away. Raphael stood frozen, realizing the threat wasn't just professional. It was personal warfare. That night, Raphael met with internal affairs and provided the messages, the encounter, everything. It was risky. Reporting could expose him, could invite scrutiny. But he had learned the hardest lesson of recovery. Secrets keep you sick. The next weeks escalated into a quiet storm. The investigation expanded. Corrupt intermediaries were watched. Warrants were prepared carefully. A major coordinated operation was planned. One designed to strike not only street distribution but the financial heart. On the morning of the operation, Raphael stood with his team as the sun rose, the city still half asleep. His supervisor looked at him. You sure you're ready? Raphael nodded. I've been ready for years. They moved fast. Targets were arrested. Documents seized. Accounts frozen. Duda was cornered in a luxury apartment. No longer the street man Raphael remembered, but dressed like success, protected by money. When the agents entered, Duda tried to smile. You, he said, almost amused. Look how far you climbed. Raphael's voice was cold. Look how far you fell. Duda laughed, but it sounded strained now. You think this makes you clean? Raphael stepped closer. No, he said. It makes me responsible. Duda's eyes flickered with something like fear. As Duda was taken away, he leaned toward Raphael and whispered, You'll never sleep. Raphael watched him go. And in that moment, Raphael understood that the top wasn't a trophy. It was a burden. Years passed. Raphael's career advanced because he became known for something rare: consistency, integrity, the ability to confront ugly systems without becoming ugly himself. He studied more. He trained more. He refused shortcuts. Eventually, he rose into leadership roles, then higher. The work became less about doors being kicked in and more about strategy, accountability, pressure. And pressure is its own drug. One day, Raphael stood in Brasilia again, older now, wearing a suit, looking into a room where decisions could change the direction of the institution. He had been nominated to lead. Some people praised his discipline. Some questioned his past. Some whispered. Raphael didn't romanticize it. He simply told the truth again. I'm not proud of who I was, he said, but I'm proud that I didn't let who I was decide who I would be. Silence filled the room. Then someone nodded, and the vote moved forward. That night, alone in his office, Raphael looked out at Brasilia's lights. He thought about the street bench, the withdrawal, the phone call to his mother, the first day at the academy, Duda's threat. He realized something that surprised him. Duda had been wrong. Raphael could sleep, not because the past disappeared, but because he stopped running from it. And now the question comes back to you, because stories like this are never just about one man. Do you believe people can truly change? Or do you believe the past should follow them forever? Leave your opinion in the comments. Subscribe to the channel if you want more stories like this. Stories that don't look away from the darkest corners of real life. And don't stop here. Watch the next recommended video because the next story will challenge your idea of redemption even more.